My name is David, and I thought I had it figured out. 7 years of marriage to Lena, and we'd settled into something that felt like contentment. Not the wild passion of our early 20s, but something steadier, the kind of love that grows quiet and comfortable. Our house on Maple Street wasn't much to look at from the outside. A modest 2-story colonial with blue shutters and a front porch that sagged slightly on the left side. But Lena had transformed the interior into something you'd see on her Pinterest boards. Mason jar centerpieces, distressed wood furniture, and those little inspirational signs that said things like, "Live, laugh, love," in cursive script. We'd been trying for kids for 3 years now. Not obsessively, but with the quiet hope that comes with each passing month. Lena would get that look in her eyes around her period. Disappointed, but not devastated. We'd agreed we had time. She was 31, I was 33. Tuesday morning started like any other. I kissed Lena goodbye as she left for her job at the elementary school, then settled in for another day of remote work. I'm a software engineer for a mid-sized firm in Cincinnati, which means I spend most of my days in our converted spare bedroom debugging code and attending video calls. That afternoon, I remembered my cousin Jake was coming to visit for the weekend. He'd called a few days earlier. His girlfriend had kicked him out again, and he needed somewhere to crash. If he was going to sleep in our guest bedroom, I needed to make sure it was actually habitable. I climbed the stairs around 3 o'clock, pushing open the door to the room we rarely used. Lena had decorated it in her usual style: cream-colored walls, a quilt her grandmother had made, and a small wooden nightstand with a lamp that cast warm light. I pulled the vacuum from the hallway closet and plugged it in, running it over the hardwood floors in long, methodical strokes. The familiar hum filled the room as I worked my way around the bed, under the window, behind the nightstand. That's when I saw it. A small glass ashtray, pushed far back behind the nightstand where it would be invisible unless you were looking at just the right angle. 3 cigarette butts lay inside, their filters stained yellow and brown. The smell hit me a second later, stale tobacco mixed with something else. My hand froze on the vacuum handle. Neither Lena nor I smoked. We never had. She was actually militant about it. Refused to eat at restaurants that allowed smoking, made faces when we walked past people with cigarettes. "It's disgusting," she'd say. "I don't understand how anyone can stand the smell." I unplugged the vacuum and crouched down, pulling the ashtray out from behind the nightstand. The cigarettes were American Spirits, the blue package. 2 of the butts had lipstick on them, a shade of red I didn't recognize, darker and more dramatic than anything I'd ever seen Lena wear. The 3rd cigarette was clean, smoked down to the filter by someone who didn't wear makeup. My stomach dropped. I stared at the ashtray, trying to construct some innocent explanation. Maybe Lena had been cleaning for someone else? Maybe Jake had been here earlier than I thought. But even as I ran through the possibilities, I knew they were nonsense. I took a picture of the ashtray with my phone, then another from a different angle. My hands were shaking slightly, but my mind felt strangely clear. I put the ashtray back exactly where I'd found it. The rest of the afternoon passed in a haze. I finished vacuuming, changed the sheets, made sure the room was ready. But every few minutes I found myself back in the doorway, staring at the spot where I'd found the ashtray. Lena came home at 5:30. Same as always. Her keys hit the ceramic bowl by the entrance, and she appeared in the kitchen doorway wearing her teaching clothes, a cardigan and slacks that made her look younger than her 31 years. "How was your day?" Lena asked. "Good," I called back, surprised at how normal my voice sounded. "Just getting ready for Jake." She nodded and started pulling ingredients out for dinner. I watched her move around the kitchen, the same routine we'd followed for years, and tried to see something different in her face. Some sign of guilt or deception. But she looked exactly like she always did. My wife, preparing our evening meal, humming softly under her breath. That night, as she took her shower, I sat on our bed and listened to the water running. In a few minutes, she'd emerge in her terry cloth robe, hair wrapped in a towel, and she'd kiss my cheek before settling in to grade papers. Our routine, our life, our marriage. But now I knew that somewhere in this house, hidden behind furniture in a room we rarely used, was evidence that nothing was what it seemed. The bathroom door opened, and Lena stepped out in a cloud of lavender-scented steam. She smiled at me, the same warm, genuine smile she'd given me for 7 years, and leaned down to kiss my cheek. "I love you," Lena said, just like she did every night. "I love you too," I replied, the words automatic and true and completely insufficient for the moment we were living through. As she settled into bed beside me, I realized that everything had changed, even though she didn't know it yet. The next 3 days were the longest of my life. I went through the motions, work calls, meals, conversations about Jake's visit, but part of my mind was always elsewhere, turning over the possibilities like stones in my hand. I'd found something I wasn't supposed to find. That much was clear. But what I'd found, and what it meant, remained frustratingly unclear. I needed more information, and I needed it without Lena knowing I was looking. Which is why, on Friday morning after she left for work, I did something I never thought I'd do. I cloned her phone. I'm a software engineer, which means I understand technology in ways most people don't. I also understand privacy, trust, and the ethical implications of surveillance. What I was about to do violated every principle I'd ever held about respecting my wife's personal space. But the ashtray had changed the rules of our marriage, even if only one of us knew it yet. The process took exactly 5 minutes. Lena had left her phone charging on the kitchen counter, something she did every morning. I connected it to my laptop, ran a mirroring program I'd downloaded the night before, and synced it to my device. From now on, every text, every call, every app notification she received would appear on my phone as well. My hands were trembling as I disconnected her device and put it back exactly where she'd left it. I felt like a criminal, but also like someone who'd been forced into criminal behavior by circumstances beyond his control. For the first day, nothing happened. Normal texts from her sister about weekend plans, work emails about parent-teacher conferences, a reminder about a dentist appointment. I began to wonder if I was losing my mind, if the cigarette butts had some innocent explanation I hadn't considered. Then, on Saturday evening, everything changed. Lena was making her famous baked ziti, the recipe she'd learned from her Italian grandmother, the one she trotted out whenever we had company coming. Jake had texted that he'd be arriving around 8, and she wanted everything perfect. She moved around the kitchen with practiced efficiency, browning ground beef and layering noodles while I sat at the breakfast bar with a beer, watching her work. "You're quiet tonight," Lena said, glancing over her shoulder as she stirred the meat sauce. "Just tired. Long week," I replied. Lena nodded sympathetically. "Well, it'll be nice to have Jake here. It's been too long since we've had family visit." My phone buzzed with a text notification. Without thinking, I glanced down, and my world imploded. The message was to Lena from someone listed in her contacts as Greg Turner, gym buddy. "He leaves for his walk at 9:30. Come then." I stared at the screen, reading the words over and over. Greg Turner, our next-door neighbor. The guy who'd helped me fix my lawnmower last spring. The guy whose wife Rachel brought us cookies at Christmas. Lena was laughing at something on the TV behind me, completely unaware that I'd just discovered the mechanism of my own betrayal. She served the ziti onto plates, poured wine, sat down across from me at our small dining table. "This looks amazing," I said, and my voice sounded normal. Somehow. "Thanks, baby." Lena took a sip of wine and smiled. "I'm glad we're doing this. Jake needed a break from his drama." I nodded and took a bite of ziti. It tasted like cardboard. "How's your gym routine going?" "You mentioned you'd been working out with neighbors." "Oh, just trying to stay in shape." Lena waved dismissively. "Nothing too serious." I looked at her across the table. My wife of 7 years, her face lit by the warm glow of our dining room chandelier, making casual conversation about her affair while serving me dinner. The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Greg Turner. Looking forward to it. Bring that thing you wore last time. This time I had to excuse myself to the bathroom. I sat on the toilet seat and stared at my phone, scrolling through their message history. There were dozens of texts going back months. Scheduling, coordination, explicit details about what they'd done and what they planned to do, and all of it timed around my evening walks. The routine I'd maintained religiously for 2 years, the 30-minute circuit through our neighborhood that I took every single night at 9:30. They'd weaponized my own habits against me. When I returned to the dining room, Lena was clearing our plates. "You barely touched your food," Lena said, concerned. "Are you feeling okay?" "Just not that hungry, I guess," I replied. Lena kissed the top of my head as she passed. "Maybe you're coming down with something." At 9:25, I laced up my sneakers just like I had every night for 2 years. Lena was in the living room, curled up on the couch with her laptop, supposedly grading papers. "I'll be back in a bit," I said. "Have a good walk, honey," Lena replied without looking up. I stepped out into the cool evening air, but instead of turning left toward my usual route, I turned right and walked to the corner of our street. From there, I had a clear view of both our house and the Turner's place next door. At 9:34, Greg emerged from his back door and jogged across the lawn to our house. He didn't knock. He had a key. I watched him disappear inside, and something died in my chest. Not love. That would take longer to bleed out. But trust. The assumption that the life I was living was real. I could have gone home then, could have burst through the door and caught them in the act, could have screamed and thrown punches and made a scene that would have felt satisfying for about 30 seconds. Instead, I walked to the Turner's house and knocked on their front door. Rachel answered, wearing yoga pants and an oversized t-shirt. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she looked tired in the way that mothers of young children always look tired. "Hi," Rachel said, surprised. "Is everything okay?" "You need to come with me," I said quietly. "Now." Something in my voice must have convinced her. She grabbed a jacket from the hook by the door and followed me across the lawn without another word. I've never been a violent person. In high school, I was the kid who mediated fights rather than starting them. In college, I was the designated driver who made sure everyone got home safe. In my marriage, I was the one who suggested counseling whenever we hit rough patches. But as I walked across Greg Turner's lawn with his wife beside me, I felt something cold and calculating settle over my thoughts. Not rage. That would come later. This was something more surgical, more precise. Rachel was talking as we approached my house, asking questions I wasn't really hearing. Something about whether there was an emergency, whether someone was hurt. I could see the confusion in her eyes, but also the growing fear as she processed my silence and the grim set of my jaw. "Listen to me carefully," I said as we reached my front door. "What you're about to see is going to hurt, but you need to see it." Rachel stopped walking. "What are you talking about?" Instead of answering, I put my key in the lock and opened the front door as quietly as possible. The living room was empty, Lena's laptop still open on the coffee table, her wine glass half full. But I could hear sounds from upstairs, voices, movement, the unmistakable rhythm of two people who thought they were alone. Rachel's face went white as the reality hit her. She started to say something, but I held up my hand and motioned for her to follow me up the stairs. The guest bedroom door was wide open. They were on the bed where I'd found the ashtray just 4 days earlier. Greg on top, Lena beneath him, both of them naked and completely absorbed in what they were doing. The same bed where my cousin was supposed to sleep in a few hours. I stepped into the doorway and cleared my throat. The effect was instantaneous. Lena's eyes flew open and locked onto mine, her face cycling through confusion, recognition, and pure terror in the space of a heartbeat. Greg froze for a moment before rolling off her, scrambling for something to cover himself with. "Don't," I said quietly. "Don't say anything. Don't move. Just listen." Rachel pushed past me into the room. I expected her to scream, to break down, to collapse. Instead, she walked calmly to the side of the bed and slapped Greg so hard he fell off the mattress onto the floor. "How long?" Rachel asked, her voice steady and ice-cold. Neither of them answered. "How long?" she pressed. Lena sat up, clutching a pillow to her chest. "Rachel, I can explain." "6 months," Greg said from the floor. "Maybe 7. Rachel nodded like she was confirming something she'd already known. Then she turned to me. "What do you want to do?" I looked at my wife, who was now crying silently, mascara running down her cheeks. I looked at my neighbor, who was trying to gather his clothes from where they'd been scattered around the room. I thought about 7 years of marriage, about the house we'd built together, about the children we'd planned to have. "Get out," I said. "Both of you, right now, naked." "Please," Lena whispered. "Let me put on—" "No." The word came out harder than I'd intended. "You want to act like animals? You can leave like animals. Out of my house, now." Greg opened his mouth to argue, but Rachel cut him off. "Do what he says. You've done enough." They stumbled out of the bedroom, down the stairs, and through the front door. I watched from the living room window as they ran across the lawn to their own house, Greg trying to cover himself while Lena wrapped her arms around her chest. The neighbors weren't out, but Mrs. Henderson across the street was walking her dog. I saw her stop and stare, her mouth falling open as she processed what she was witnessing. By tomorrow, the whole street would know. Rachel sat down heavily on my couch, still staring out the window. "I should have known," Rachel said. "All those evening workouts, all those times he came home smelling like perfume he claimed was from the gym." "I only figured it out 4 days ago," I said. "What gave it away?" she asked. I told her about the ashtray, about the cigarette butts with lipstick. She nodded grimly. "He's been smoking again. I found a pack in his truck last week, but he said he was holding it for a friend." Rachel laughed, but there was no humor in it. "God, we're idiots." "No," I said. "We're not idiots. We're people who trusted our spouses. There's a difference." We sat in silence for a while, two people who'd had their lives detonated in the span of 5 minutes. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet again. Normal, as if nothing had happened. But everything had happened, and there was no going back. Jake arrived an hour later to find me on the front porch with Rachel, both of us drinking beer and staring at the street like we were waiting for something. "This is weird," Jake said, looking between us. "Where's Lena? And why is there women's clothing scattered on the lawn?" I handed him a beer. "It's been an interesting evening." Jake looked at the clothes again, then at Rachel, then at me. Understanding dawned on his face. "Oh, shit," Jake said. "Oh, dude, I'm sorry." "Yeah," I said. "Me too." We sat on the porch until nearly midnight, not saying much, just existing in the aftermath of the explosion. Rachel went home eventually, after Greg called to tell her he was staying at his brother's place. That night, I slept alone in my own bed for the first time in 7 years. The house felt different, emptier, but also somehow cleaner, like a fever had broken. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Monday morning, I called in sick to work and made an appointment with the best divorce attorney in town. Jennifer Walsh had a reputation for being thorough, aggressive, and expensive. She was worth every penny. I brought printouts of every text message, every photo, every piece of digital evidence I'd gathered. I also brought Rachel Turner, who'd decided she was done with Greg's nonsense and wanted to coordinate our legal strategies. Jennifer sat behind her mahogany desk, studying the evidence with the clinical detachment of someone who'd seen it all before. Her gray hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her reading glasses made her look like a librarian who'd gone to law school for revenge. "This is comprehensive," Jennifer said after 20 minutes of silence. "Almost obsessively so." "I'm a software engineer," I said. "I document everything." "Good. That's going to make this very straightforward." Jennifer set the papers aside and looked at both of us. "In Ohio, we have no-fault divorce, which means adultery doesn't technically matter for the dissolution itself, but it matters enormously for asset division, spousal support, and custody arrangements." Rachel leaned forward. "We have 2 kids, 8 and 10. Then this evidence is going to be devastating for your husband. Courts don't look kindly on parents who prioritize affairs over family stability." Jennifer turned to me. "Any children?" "Number. But we own the house together, have joint bank accounts, retirement funds. All of which will be much easier to divide in your favor given this documentation." Jennifer tapped the printouts. "Your wife won't have much leverage to negotiate. Neither will Mr. Turner." The legal process moved faster than I'd expected. Jennifer was right. Neither Lena nor Greg had the guts to fight it. When confronted with the evidence, their attorneys advised them to settle quickly and quietly. Lena signed over her half of the house without argument. She kept her car and her personal belongings, but everything else, the retirement accounts, the savings, the furniture she'd so carefully chosen, stayed with me. She moved in with her sister in Columbus, taking a teaching job at a school district an hour away. Greg's situation was worse. Rachel got primary custody of their kids, the house, and most of their assets. The family court judge was particularly unsympathetic to Greg's explanations about needing space and feeling unfulfilled in his marriage. He lost his shared custody arrangement and was relegated to supervised visits every other weekend. The whole process took 3 months, fast, clean, and undeniable. During those 3 months, Rachel and I found ourselves spending more time together. Not romantically, we were both too raw for that, but as 2 people who'd survived the same shipwreck and understood what the other was going through. She'd come over in the evenings after her kids were asleep, and we'd sit on my back deck drinking beer and talking about everything except our ex-spouses. She told me about her job as a physical therapist, about the satisfaction of helping people recover from injuries and trauma. I told her about my work, about the clean logic of code, and the way problems always had solutions if you were patient enough to find them. "You're not what I expected," Rachel said one night in late August. We were watching fireflies blink on and off in my backyard. "What did you expected?" I asked. "Someone angrier, more bitter." Rachel took a sip of her beer. "If I'd found evidence of Greg's affair the way you found Lena's, I would have burned his clothes and keyed his truck." "I thought about it," I admitted. "But anger is just another kind of trap. It keeps you focused on them instead of figuring out what you actually want." "And what do you want?" she asked. I considered the question. 6 months ago, I would have said I wanted my marriage back, wanted the future Lena and I had planned, but that future had been built on a foundation of lies. "I want to be with someone who chooses to be honest," I said finally. "Someone who doesn't make me wonder what they're hiding." Rachel nodded. "That sounds nice. Simple." "Simple doesn't mean easy," I replied. "No," Rachel agreed, "but it's a start." The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday in September. I signed the papers in Jennifer's office, officially ending 7 years of marriage with a few strokes of a pen. There was no ceremony, no witnesses except the attorney and her paralegal. That evening, Rachel came over with a bottle of wine and Chinese takeout. "How do you feel?" Rachel asked as we sat at my kitchen table. "Free," I said, and realized I meant it. For the first time in months, I feel free. Rachel raised her wine glass. "To freedom and to honest ground." I clinked my glass against hers. "To honest ground." 6 months later, Rachel and I are sitting on the same back deck where we spent so many evenings talking through our respective divorces. But tonight feels different, lighter somehow. Her kids are at Greg's for one of his supervised visits. My cousin Jake is inside, making what he calls his world-famous grilled cheese sandwiches. "I got a job offer," Rachel says, swirling her wine in its glass. "Yeah? Where?" I asked. "Cincinnati Children's Hospital, head of pediatric physical therapy." I set down my beer. "That's huge. Congratulations." "It's also an hour away, every day." "But it's what you want?" I asked. Rachel nods. "It's what I want. I'm just nervous about uprooting the kids again." "They'll adjust," I say. "Kids are more resilient than we think." "What about us?" Rachel asks quietly. It's the question we've been dancing around for months. We're not rushing anything. We're both too damaged for that kind of recklessness. But there's something building between us. "I don't know," I say honestly. "But I know I don't want to lose what we have." "Which is what exactly?" she asked. I think about it. Trust, honesty, the feeling that I don't have to wonder what you're really thinking or where you really are. Rachel nods. "I've never had that before. Not really." The sliding door opens and Jake appears with grilled cheese sandwiches. Did someone order room service? After he goes back inside, Rachel and I eat in comfortable silence. The September air carries the first hint of autumn coolness. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop," Rachel says eventually. "For you to turn out to be hiding something, or for me to discover I'm not as healed as I think I am." "Maybe that's normal," I say. "Maybe trust is something you have to build piece by piece." "Is that what we're doing? Building trust?" she asked. "I think so, along with everything else," I replied. Rachel reaches over and takes my hand. Her fingers are warm and slightly rough from her work, and they fit against mine naturally. "If I take the job," Rachel says, "would you consider moving closer to the city?" I think about my house on Maple Street, about the guest bedroom where I found the ashtray, about the neighbors who still whisper when I walk by, about the life I built with Lena and how little of it actually feels like mine anymore. "Yeah," I say, "I think I would." Later, as I walk her to her car, she stops and looks back at my house. "Do you ever miss it?" Rachel asks. "The way things were before?" I consider the question. I miss the feeling of certainty, but I don't miss the life itself. Not anymore. "Because it wasn't real?" she asked. "Because it wasn't chosen. Not by both of us," I replied. Rachel nods, understanding. This feels chosen. She kisses me goodnight. Brief, soft, unhurried. Then she drives home to her kids and her life, and I go inside to help Jake with the dishes. As I turn off the lights and head upstairs, I think about Lena and Greg and wonder if they ever think about what they destroyed. Then I realize I don't actually care what they think or feel. Their story is over. Mine is just beginning, and it's being written on honest ground. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.